Help her find them. Okay, hold that again. We're not too sure if we're going to get it all again. Okay, I want to know in order if you can remember again Minnie's sisters and brothers. Who was oldest, do you think? You think John was oldest?
I think my Uncle John was the oldest.
Okay.
And next to him was my mother's sister Anna.
Anna.
I can't. And then come her sister Ethel. And then her sister Mabel. I think my mother was the youngest.
Yeah.
And I think that's all of them.
Okay. So John, Anna, Ethel, that's 4, and then Minnie.
And then Minnie. Yeah. Mary Louise.
Okay.
I can't think about I think I thought of it the other day, but I can't remember my Aunt Anna's husband's name.
Well, who was your father's brothers and sisters? You remember them?
Okay, I think my father was the oldest. And next to him was my Aunt Geneva. And then come my Aunt Lois.
Lois?
Lois, L-O-I-S. And then my Uncle Forrest. And then my Aunt Marjorie. I started at the oldest down.
Okay.
I think that's all of them.
Yeah, okay. Oldest to youngest. Yeah. Okay. Can you remember the happiest memories you have of your mother? With your mother? You have of your mother?
Well, I think the happiest times were when we'd sit around the house in the evenings playing pinochle and cribbage.
Oh, really?
She loved to play cards, Mom and Dad too.
Yeah?
And then she would, well, I wasn't too proud of them though. She used to go rabbit hunting quite often.
Oh, really?
And she did the shooting. And she was a good shot. She had her own .22.
Yeah?
And we'd go hunting cottontail rabbits. And we ate lots of rabbits.
Yeah?
Of course, this is Depression days and things were tight. But
I can remember when she on the homestead, when she went out squirrel hunting.
yeah.
She shot those squirrels for us. Come to think of it. Do you remember what year did Minnie die? 1995 or 4?
Well, she was 93 and born in 1903, so that'd make it 90, wouldn't it?
Born in 1903?
Oh, no, it'd be 96, I guess.
So if she died in 96, she would have been
In 1996, she'd been 93, I think.
93 years old?
Yeah.
Okay. Boy, that's pretty old.
Yeah.
Okay. I could really go into... Okay. Has your father shared any stories he knew about his parents' childhoods? Remember any stories of your grandparents?
My grandparents?
Effie and William?
No, just we'd go visit them on their farm. I remember whenever I would see my grandmother, I would definitely not want to go there with a cold.
Oh?
Because she would make me take a tablespoonful of sugar that she'd pour kerosene on top of it.
No.
I just hated that, so I thought it was going to kill me, you know.
Well, yeah.
So I tried to hide a cold. I'd never go with a cold.
No way. That's terrible. I'm sure glad they changed it to honey.
Well, there's a kerosene that I minded.
Yeah. Do you remember when and where your father was born?
No, I don't know.
Somewhere
I think
along
he was
in
born in
Kansas.
Kansas, but
Yeah. Kansas, probably, huh?
I know I was born in Frontenac, Kansas, and I kind of suspect he was born there too, but I don't know.
Where were you born?
Frontenac.
Spell that.
Frontenac.
F-R-O-N...
T-N-E. That's in front.
Front?
F-R-O-N-T-N-E-C. Yeah, Frontenac.
Frontenac. That's the name of a town?
That's the name of a little town, and it's right almost like a suburb of Pittsburgh, Kansas. I don't think you'll ever find Frontenac on it. Although Dean and Cindy looked it up on the internet and they found it.
Yeah? Wow. Tell about the family in which your father grew up. Do you know what his childhood was like? Do you remember any stories he may have told you? Remember any stories about his life? Your father?
No. I'm
No?
sure he told a lot of stories, but none of them come to mind. Apparently it didn't impress me too much.
Well, you know what, that's probably true. You don't remember things that other people told you because...
Too busy living
Too busy
creating
living
my own
your own
memories.
life, yeah. What memories do you have of your father during your childhood? Okay, he worked in a coal mine for a while, right?
Yeah. This is why he went to Wyoming. He heard there were, in the Laramie area, there were quite a few coal mines, and they weren't too deep. And when we got to Laramie, Wyoming, he leased a coal mine, and he purchased an old beat-up Model T truck. And this mine was in a town called Rollins that was probably 50 or 60 miles from Laramie. And he would go to the mine he had leased, and he'd spend the whole week there. He'd come home on weekends. And when he'd come home, he'd bring a truckload of coal in the back of this old truck, and then he'd go around and sell it. And I remember going with him one time to blast. He said he had to shoot the mine, and he had the holes all drilled, and he was going out to make a special trip out to explode the dynamite. Because it made so much dust in the mine, he just had to let it settle for 3 or 4 days before he went into work. And I remember going in with him there, and he'd stick this black powder. First he'd take this black powder, which looked like granulated old laundry soap, for instance, but it was black.
Uh-huh.
And he would pour it out on a bench, on a newspaper, and move it all around, and he'd roll the newspaper up, and it was in a tube with the powder inside of it. It was just about the diameter of the hole he had drilled. And he'd take a long stick, and first he'd tie a fuse to this powder and put a cap in it on the first when it went in the hole. And then he'd poke that in the hole very carefully, and of course the fuse would come all the way out to the end. He'd poke it in very carefully. He got the bottom, then he'd roll up another newspaper and stick it in, and he'd just jam it in there just as tight as he could. And when he got the hole filled, well, then he'd have this fuse hanging out. And I don't know how many we did, but when they were all in there, then we went back, and he took his pocket knife, cut the end of it, and of course he smoked like a chimney. He'd take a cigarette and stick it in there,
Right.
and we'd go to the next one, same thing. And I was getting scared,
I bet.
And he had them all figured out when they were going to go off, and we finally got the last one done. I said, "We better hurry, get out of here." He said, "Oh, no," he says, "not time yet." And we just walked out to the end, and we sat down at the entrance for 5 minutes or so, and all of a sudden, boom, here comes this big black cloud out of there, all the black dust and everything. Then we went home, and he went back.
For a day or so till the dust settled, huh?
Till the dust settled.
I read a book about, it was just a fictional story, but it, based on a
Yeah.
coal miner and how they blew up the mines that way.
It was kind of, it was very interesting to me, but I was kind of scared. I was just a little kid. I was only in the first grade, I think.
Yeah. Would be a little terrifying. So
Yeah.
he made his own dynamite sticks then.
Yeah, well, he didn't use dynamite. They used black powder then.
What?
I think dynamite probably hadn't been invented yet. I'm not sure.
I don't think they called it dynamite. They called it something.
No, it was
like
not
that.
dynamite. Dynamite come in sticks, and later
Yeah,
on he
yeah.
used that too. He was
Yeah.
later on when he worked in the cement quarry. I'd go with him some days when on the weekends when nobody was working. He'd go over to blast all the big boulders that were too big to get in the steam shovel, and he wanted them in smaller pieces so they could load them up and haul them away, and they couldn't. The bucket of the steam shovel wasn't too big, you know, and they couldn't get these big boulders into it. And here again, what he would do, he'd take a real dynamite this time,
Yeah.
and he'd put a cap in it, and usually, depending on the side of the rock, it may be a half a stick or a whole stick. But he'd put the fuse in it, and just a little short fuse to light, and he'd lay it right on a certain spot in the middle of this big boulder. Then he'd pick up another rock and sit on top of it to hold it down, I guess. And actually what it did is force the blast down.
Yeah.
And same thing, we'd light the thing and go wandering away, no hurry, you know. Boom, and go back, and that rock was just a bunch of...
Good grief.
I remember one day we lived right next to the quarry at our house, and he was trying to dig a well for us to have water in the house. And the river was across the railroad tracks, probably 100 yards away. And he figured that he only had to go down about 8 feet to hit water table because the level of the river, you know. But it was real hard digging with all that limestone and stuff, like the quarry we were digging in. And he couldn't get through it, you know. This hole was probably right by the kitchen window, and the hole was probably, 7 or 8 foot in diameter. And he shoveled, and he'd take a pick and pick up that rock. But one day he decided there was a quicker way to do it, and he put a whole stick of dynamite on that thing. And I thought that house is a log house. I thought sure the thing, but he made us open all the windows first.
Yeah.
And didn't do any damage,
be
but
darned.
it just shook that thing.
Oh.
And it still didn't get water. We never did
Still
get
didn't
water. I had to pack water with buckets from the river over there.
Shoot. Minnie was probably fit to be tied.
She was sweating, I mean.
Why not?
But he knew what he was doing. He was, they called them
Yeah.
powder monkeys, I think.
Yeah.
He did all the blasting for him at the quarry, and he'd drill holes in this cliff of solid rock, limestone. And weekends was the time he'd do that. And of course during the week he'd have somebody drilling these holes. He'd tell them where to drill them. And then come Saturday when nobody was working there, well, he'd go down and pump dynamite in all these various holes and blast it, light them.
My goodness.
You know, it's interesting to realize now how many different things I was exposed to.
Yeah.
And he used to take me with him to help him.
Yeah. Just you, never Wayne and Keith?
They were too little at the
They
time.
were too little.
I was the oldest. I remember one time Wayne and I were playing in the field out across the other side of the quarry, and Wayne found this little round tin box. He brought it up to me and said, "Look, I found a box of 22 bullets," and they were blasting caps.
Oh my God.
And all you had to do was drop them, you know, and they'd explode. And I said,
explode.
"Hey, put them down. They're going to blow up." And he threw them down. We ran.
God.
They didn't go off.
They didn't. Oh my gosh.
I told my dad about it, though, and he immediately took us back there to find the thing.
Yeah.
That's not something you leave laying around.
That's for sure. Oh my gosh. I'm just amazed that you remember all this. This is always something. Let's see here. You just told me a lot of these questions already. Okay, let's see. Do we know when he died?
My father died in 1945. He was born in 1898, so he was only 47 years old.
He was born when?
1898.
So he was only 47 years old.
47 years
Pretty
old.
old. Pretty young. And he died of complications from...
He had a disease they call Berger's disease.
Oh, okay.
And it was hardening of the arteries is another term for it. But what happened was your blood vessels constricted, closed up, and you got no circulation to your extremities, to his legs or his arms. And it was probably caused by excessive tobacco, too much smoking. That's why I was always wondering about Stan. Maybe that was his problem, but he's got a different problem, I think.
He could. Off the
But
record.
they actually amputated his leg. He got gangrene in a toe, and they amputated it, and he could no longer work at the quarry or in the cement factory. That was a big change in our life.
Yeah.
Then we moved to eastern Colorado, out in a dry farming area. Of course, that's when my education really began.
Yeah.
He leased this farm, this dry farm, on shares. I think I told you the other day, we had to pay, whatever we sold, we had to give 10% for rent.
Oh,
And we tried to raise corn, kaffir corn, millet, a lot of things, but it was so dry. And this is out in the Dust Bowl area. And we never did get a crop, could raise anything that we could harvest. And then we had several plagues of, one summer we had a plague of army worms, they called them. And those worms were little crawly worms, all about an inch long, like caterpillars, and they had a whole bunch of legs. And they just come crawling across the field, just millions and millions and millions of them. And driving to town, many times we'd almost slip off the road. The things were running over. They were just so thick. And,
were they caterpillars?
Yeah, they didn't have fur on them, but they just had bare, but little green worms.
Oh my gosh.
And they called them army worms. I'd like to know what they were.
Oh my gosh.
But we had one year we had this plague of army worms, and several years after that we had a plague of grasshoppers. Same way, just everywhere you look, just billions of the things. And they were so hungry, they just ate everything in their path. And we had corn that we were trying to raise that year. It was about that high. And when these grasshoppers got through, there was a stalk here and there. They even ate the stalk through it. And you could sit on the edge of that field if it was a calm day and the wind wasn't blowing, and you could hear them eating. You hear all this rustling, all this corn just being devoured. And our windmill was, the tower was made of 4x4s, and it was probably, tall as this house, maybe 30 foot tall, you know. And the grasshoppers actually ate the wood of those things, so the tower, the 4x4s were only about that big around. And we had to dismantle the windmill because they would have fallen.
Yeah. So how long did this plague last? Was it just like a day or so? Or
No, it was all summer.
Really? Wow.
And after the first year of those, well, my dad got the brilliant idea that he made a deal with some feed company that sold chicken feed. They would finance turkeys, and he signed a contract with them to raise, I don't know, probably 5,000 turkeys. And they sent him all these baby turkeys when they were day old. And we had a brooder house, and we kept them warm and babied them and everything. And because of these grasshopper plagues, turkeys love grasshoppers. When the turkeys got big enough to get out and forage a little bit, well, we just turned them loose, and they would start eating these grasshoppers, and they just range clear across maybe 8 or 10 miles, and just keep going as long as any grasshoppers eat. They just keep eating.
Yeah.
And he gave me a .22 and a blanket, and I went with him. I lived with those turkeys. That's what Cindy, I don't know whether we ever told you this, we were playing bridge one night, and I did something kind of sneaky to her. She called me, "Oh, you turkey herder." She didn't know that was true.
Guess what, Cindy? I really was a turkey herder.
That's what I told her.
That was no offense.
That's a big joke ever since.
Oh my God.
Next time you see her, ask her about turkey herders.
Turkey herders. Shoot.
But I did. We'd herded those turkeys. Come fall, well, I probably told you this one too, but learned how to kill turkeys. Have you heard this?
No.
Uh, and it's quite an art, as I found out later. But when you killed turkeys in those days, all livestock, all poultry, when you sold it, you left the heads on, and they went to the market. There's no refrigeration, no freezing or anything. They were fresh. And this company that we had the contract with would oversee it, and they'd give my dad a call or something, and they'd say, we need 500 turkeys in this town of Greeley, which was probably 70 or 80 miles from us, on a certain date. Or somebody else. There's quite a few people in the area that raise turkeys. And I know I got a job with a neighbor one day. They asked me if I would come over and kill turkeys for them, help them butcher them. I think they had 500 we had to do that day. And what you used was a knife that was about 8 inches long, and it was like a needle. It was flat, but it was almost needle sharp at one end and very slender, and similar to a letter opener, except it was razor sharp all the way up and down. And the turkeys, we had they made some hangers out of heavy metal wire that we'd bend in a shape and then hang it up on we had this pole going across this open barn that we was going to butcher in, and they'd hang these hangers on from this pole. You just pick the turkey up, put their legs in it, and they'd hang upside down, and they'd all hang there with their wings hanging down and their head up, you know. And I'd have to go through, and I'd take them by the head, and I'd stick this knife right in their temple. I'd just push it in until I felt it hit the top of their head, their brain.
Yeah.
And the turkeys never flinched or anything. Apparently it was so sharp they didn't even feel it too much. And then I'd start twisting the knife, and pretty soon they'd just drop. It would kill them.
Yeah.
And when they died like that, and all their feathers would just sort of relax too. And then we had a bunch of weights there with a hook on them, and I'd hang that weight in the bottom of their jaw, just stick it through the bottom part of their beak till it come through, just let it hang there, and that hit the head down. And before I put the weight on them, too, I'd go in the roof of their mouth and make a big X right across the roof of their mouth, which would get the jugular vein.
Yeah.
And then they would bleed, and this weight would hold their head down. And of course, all their feathers are just hanging there loose. And I could go up on each leg. I'd take one hand on each leg and just bring it down around the leg and down the body, and all the feathers would come off. And I'd take all the wings, and the feathers would come out of the wings.
My
and
goodness.
there'd be nothing left but a few pin feathers. And when they were through bleeding, then they had a crew of, I don't know, this guy's wife and several neighbor women we'd put these turkeys on this table, and they'd go through and pull out whatever pin feathers were on. But I'd take all the feathers off and kill them. And I had more turkeys to kill than I could handle, you know. I mean, there was a lot of turkeys there, and I don't know why other people didn't learn to do that, but I was the only one in the area that knew how to do it. And one day I remember we had a big batch of turkeys, and they were all, after they were butchered and pin feathered, then we just had these big shelves along the inside of this open building. It was just a roof with open sides, so the air would go through, and these turkeys were laying on these shelves, which were just, they had slats so the air could circulate, and they were cooling up there so they could take them in the truck to...
You haven't gutted them or anything yet?
No, we didn't gut them. They went to the market with their guts in them.
Okay.
And there's a reason for this, so people who bought them could see that they were healthy. They knew how to look at their heads and the entrails and everything and tell if they were diseased or not. But we were had just finished up, and all these birds were on this shelf, and we were waiting for the truck to come to pick them up. And one of these turkeys jumped up, stark naked, and ran out across the field.
Oh my God!
And I never killed another one after that. It just
not.
made me sick.
Oh man!
Because they were supposed to be dead.
I can't believe you had the stomach to even be able to do that, though.
No,
They say
from then
turkey-
on, I've
Yeah.
never liked
Never
to,
been able
never
to
wanted
do
to
it
kill
again,
anything.
huh?
No.
You were young and...
I was still in high school.
Yeah. Oh, man. I
No,
don't
that
know.
just made me sick of my stomach, to see
Poor
the...
little turkey surely didn't live very long after he...
Oh, we chased him all over the area.
Oh,
We
my
could
God.
catch him, and I think when we finally caught him, I think we just cut his head off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, he didn't go to market. Somebody ate him.
No. That's so gross. Oh, goodness. Well, that was a very interesting story.
And that was eastern Colorado, out in the drylands.
Yeah. Yeah. I've read I read so much. I read novels all the time about the locust pests.
Yeah.
Like the,
Well, that was something. Those grasshoppers, they'd get to be that long, and they'd have usually reddish brown wings, beautiful colors, and they'd fly. You hear 'em bzzz,
yeah.
and they'd launch.
Oh.
The same thing, driving down the road, you run over them and just squash
Yeah.
millions of them.
Crunch, crunch, crunch. Okay. Well, let's see here. It says, do you have any idea how your mother and father met? And how long they knew each other before they were married? Anything
That I
about
haven't a
it?
clue.
Haven't a clue about
Nobody never would talk
how
about
they
it.
met.
It's an interesting thing. I remember one day as a baby in a crib, and my mother had the blanket real tight. You grab a hold of it, but I couldn't pull it up, and it was early evening. Well, it was getting dark, probably 8 o'clock in the evening, and it was a hot day in Kansas, and she had all the windows open, blowing through, and apparently she and my father had a big argument. And I can remember to this day hearing them hollering at each other. I remember her saying, "If you go to that dance, I'm going to leave you," or something like that.
Yeah?
And
Isn't that something? What a memory.
it really upset me,
Huh. But what had that to do with the crib and the blanket?
I don't know. It's just the
It just was
memory.
part
Every
of the
time I see
memory.
something tied
Tight
down,
like that?
and I'm sure they did that to babies so they couldn't
Yeah.
smother.
Right, yeah.
But every time I see a tight blanket like that, that memory
That
comes
brings
back.
brings out that memory.
I don't know what the outcome of it was. I was locked in my little cage.
Yeah.
I remember my dad walking by the open window, though, and she followed him through the house, the other end of the house, and she went outside, and I guess they had it out, whatever it was.
Now, okay, we're talking about you. Okay, when and where you were born. You've already told me that. Anything unusual about your birth? You had well, that's true. Where were you born? Were you born at home?
I was born at home,
Huh?
I guess. I don't know. She never told me that either.
Yeah, you just assume you were born at home?
I just assumed I was, because all babies in those days
You both were
were.
born at home?
Yeah.
Have you any clue why you were given your name?
Yeah.
Oh.
At that time, moving pictures had just been invented, I guess. And I was named after one of my mother's favorite child movie stars. And his name was Jackie Coogan.
I'll be darned.
In fact, I think he's still alive.
I think you're right. He must have been very, very young, though, if he was alive. If he's alive now.
Well, he
he'd
was a
have to be-
child star. They had what they call the Our Gang movie.
Oh.
All these little kids were, I don't know what you call them, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, They had their own little gang. And this particular guy named movie star was part of that gang.
Yeah, I'll be darned. Okay.
I never did forgive her for that. I hated that name all the time. I grew up with it.
Hated it. So they called you Jackie.
Jackie was
Jackie.
my name. Then when I grew up, old enough to realize, I said, how come I didn't get a real name? That's a nickname.
Do you have a birth certificate that
John.
says your name is Jackie?
Well,
Or is it Jack?
they just call it Jack. But,
Oh.
yeah, that's what my book said.
Jack. Jackie?
Usually John, Jack's
Yeah.
a nickname for him.
Oh, I see where you're coming from. Yeah. Usually it is John.
And they didn't give me a real name.
They gave you a pretend name. These are all things that I can transcribe from what you really told me. What stories you've been told about yourself as a baby? What are your earliest memories of your childhood? Were you a happy child? I think so. What were you like as a child? Were you a holy terror as a child? Yes, somewhat.
Probably was. I remember coming home from school in the first grade. I had this square lunch pail. I remember bringing that lunch pail home and coming down this path across the field. I found a snapping turtle about that big around. I gathered him up, put him under my arm, and I brought him home. My mother had a fit. She says, "That's a snapping turtle. They don't turn loose until it thunders if they bite you."
And it never bit you?
Never did bite me.
Well, she probably made you throw him away, though, huh?
Yeah, she wouldn't let me have him.
She wouldn't let you keep him. Oh. Let's do this is describe the home or homes and neighborhoods in which you grew up. You started out in Frontenac, right?
Frontenac. I don't remember much about the house there, except we had a thunderstorm one day, and the lightning hit the house, and they call it ball lightning, but it come in through a screen door and burned a hole through the screen door about that big around.
Oh my gosh.
Went clear through the house and went off the screen in the bedroom window that was open, and burned another hole. It didn't set anything on fire, didn't hurt anybody. In fact, I don't think anybody was home at the time.
Yeah. Wow.
But I can't really remember what the house looked like.
Do you remember what year you left there? How old were you?
Well, I was in the first grade.
Okay, so you were about 6 years old then.
Yeah, from there we went to Laramie, Wyoming,
Then you went
and
to
I
Wyoming?
entered the first grade there and went through the whole, maybe it was kindergarten I was in they had such a thing in Kansas.
Mm-hmm. Went from Laramie, Wyoming, from about 7 until, do you remember when you left Laramie?
I left there when I was in the 10th grade high school,
So you were about 15 or 16 then.
15 or 16.
And from Laramie, you went where?
Laramie, we moved to a little town in Colorado called New Raymer.
Oh, that's right. New Raymer, Colorado. And there's where you graduated,
I
right?
graduated there, and I left home as quick as I could get away out of school, just to get away from it, because that's when my parents become Jehovah's Witnesses. I couldn't stand that.
Get out of there before they got you. Minnie wasn't really into Jehovah's Witnessing at that point, was she?
She's the one that started it.
Oh, yeah?
She talked my dad into it, too.
Oh, and then she dropped
They
out
used
of
to
it.
go knock on doors, and they made us kids go with them and go knock on doors and peddle this
Oh, how horrible.
stuff, and I just couldn't stand it.
I know.
And I know I questioned her every turn, every time they said, and we had these Bible sessions twice a week. We'd sit around the table and they'd open the Bible and start reading it, and they'd discuss it and why and everything. And I know I used to have some real debates, although it wasn't the Bible so much as the people who started this Jehovah's Witness. They called it the Watchtower, the book, and they would read out of that thing, and I'd say, I don't know what he's talking about. He's all wet. Oh, but it says so right here. I says, hey, that guy's just another man back in New York City somewhere.
That's right. Are you going to believe everything I write if I wrote a
Yeah, that's what I tell them.
religious book?
Oh, but it says so in the Bible, but we just don't understand it, see.
Okay.
Oh, they were hooked.
I'll be darned. I didn't realize she was Jehovah's Witness back then. I just
And
thought
my
she
mother's
got
the
it
one that
when
started
we
it.
got here. Then she dropped it entirely after you moved. After we came to Alaska.
No, that's when they started it. And in Soldotna, she and Keith were real up in the hierarchy in the Soldotna church.
But she wasn't a practicing Jehovah's Witness when we lived on the homestead and stuff. I don't remember her.
Well, she couldn't get anybody to do it with her, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how
She kind of started it when they moved out of the homestead.
Yeah. And Wayne was involved with it too.
Right.
She got them both involved.
Oh, yeah. 'Cause, 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 'cause Okay, so then after graduation, where did you go?
After graduation, I went to Los Angeles area.
Okay, then you moved to L.A.
I stayed with my grandmother at Redondo Beach. And my grandfather had died then, and she was alone. And she kind of really appreciated it because she never did learn to drive. And so when I got there, and I drove my old car out there, and it was on its last legs. I think we had to junk it.
Mm-hmm.
And she went out and bought another one very similar to the one I just drove out there, and gave me the keys and said, "You drive me around. It's your car, but you drive me around when I need to go shopping and things." And I'd drive her all over wherever she wanted to go.
She liked that.
She wanted to go to the...
Yeah.
At that time, there was what they called Townsend Club, and it was for older people, retired people, and they called it the Old Age Club. And they had a meeting, I think twice a week. She wanted to go to those, but she usually preferred to walk. It's only the next block, you know. But she wanted, if it was raining or something, I'd drive her and her friend was Mrs. Pilkington. And the two of them would get, and Pilkington was just as skinny as my grandmother was heavy, you know. And quite a pair.
Oh, funny. God, I can't believe you remember all of this. This is so amazing. Do you feel like your memory's better now than, or is it just because I'm sitting here pulling all these memories out of you?
Well, they're all locked in there.
Yeah.
I never think about these
Yeah.
things unless somebody
Yeah.
brings up something
Yeah.
to remind me.
Oh, man, I hope this all records good. You can write a book. If I were the type of person that liked to write, that knew how to write.
Yeah, you know, in each phase of my life like that had its own little story to go with it.
Yeah.
But when I first went out there, I think I told you I went to work in a service station, pumping gas and fixing tires and whatever. And the guy asked me wanted me to become a jockey for him, and I wasn't interested in riding. I said, I've had my fill of riding. I'd rather pump gas than ride a horse.
You were the right size. Just think, your whole fate might have been totally different.
That,
if you had
I'm
taken
sure it
him
would
on
have
that.
been, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I kind of associated that trade, jockeys and everything, with maybe the, what do you call it, mafia or the gangsters type
Yeah.
thing, you know.
Because there was a lot of gambling. It
Yeah.
was. And, you
Yeah.
know, I think in a lot of cases, races were set. You
Very
know,
well could have been.
You make your horse lose this time.
I know in my mind at the time, that was one of the big reasons I didn't want to get involved. I thought, I don't want to become that kind of a character,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Wow. Let's see. Okay, now we get to tell about your brothers and sisters. Okay, let's talk about Wayne. Let's see. Wayne was probably born in
1926, March the
1920
5th.
March 5th?
Mm-hmm.
March 5, 1926.
And Keith was born November... Wait a minute.
November?
No,
Maybe
Wayne
off.
was not the 5th. Keith was November 5th, and Wayne was March... Funny, I lost the date. It'll come to me.
But what year?
Keith was born 1929.
1929. And he may not have been the 5th of March, but at least it was March and November.
Yeah, it was March.
Right here. And you were born in 21, right?
21,
21.
October.
So you were about 4 years older before Wayne came along. So what'd you think of it when Wayne came along? After being this spoiled little boy that did everything with Daddy.
Actually, I don't remember too much about that. I remember more Keith being born. I really can't remember Wayne's.
Because you were only 4.
Yeah, I
You
was
probably
pretty
remember you were
young.
almost 9
Yeah,
when Keith
yeah, I
was
was
born.
pretty young, I guess.
Yeah. Do you remember all that? Did you guys fight a lot, or?
Yeah, we fought a lot, but Wayne and I we played together well. I mean, we'd go on these adventures down the river swimming. Remember, we may have to sneak away from the house. But
Yeah.
we'd go swimming all the time, and I don't know, this one day I probably told you this one too, but this river, the Laramie River, comes from the Snowy Range, the mountains on the west of town, probably 50 or 60 miles away. And in the wintertime, the Union Pacific Railroad would have crews up there cutting trees and making ties, railroad ties. And they'd dump them all in this river so they'd float down when the flood come, when the spring, when the snows would melt, the river would go off its banks, you know, and it'd be thousands, these ties would just be solid all the whole length of the river. And for Wayne and I, man, what a treat that was. We'd go down there at the river and we'd take a hammer with us and a pocket full of nails and maybe a little board or two. We'd get 3 or 4 of these ties together and just nail a cleat across them, so we had a raft.
Oh my God.
And we floated down this river and just had a ball, you know.
Did Minnie know? Or
No,
your dad?
she didn't know. We were forbidden.
Oh my God.
I know this one day we went clear down, I don't know, several miles past town. When the sun started getting low, we thought we'd better be getting home because we weren't even supposed to be out, you know.
Shoot.
And I knew she was going to be furious. So Keith, Wayne and I, we went out to the shed and we got a couple of shingles off the roof of the garage. And we made a shingle, just 2 shingles, just to fit in the seat of our pants, put them inside of our pants, you know, because we knew we were going to get a whipping. And sure enough, my mother come at us and she started whacking me with her hand.
Yeah.
And I broke her hand. She really got mad then. And she made us take those shingles out, and she got a belt this time and just give us both.
Oh my
But she
God.
was worried, you know, and we were late,
Well,
and it was stupid.
You guys could have drowned.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that anybody didn't see you. Would have.
Well, nobody was down
Nobody
there.
was down there.
We didn't see us so all
You
the
little
time.
culprits, you.
Well, we were pretty ornery, I guess.
Yeah.
We give her a hard time.
Did you have other little friends that you corrupted as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they came a little later, though.
Yeah. Shoot. My goodness. Ah. Do you remember your first elementary school and the first day you were there?
Yes.
What?
My teacher was named Miss Blue.
Mrs. Blue.
B-E-L-I, wait a minute, B-I-L-E-I-E-U or something like that. Blue, B-I-L-I-E-U. No, that was my 4th grade teacher. My 1st grade teacher was Mrs. Beckwith.
Oh, wait a minute. This is 4th grade? Mrs. who?
Beckwith was my 1st grade teacher.
Beckwith? Like
B-E-C-K-W-I-T-H.
Beckwith was the first
Beckwith.
grade, huh?
And we loved her. She was great. And my 2nd grade teacher was Mrs. Beck, B-E-C-K, and she taught 2nd and 3rd. And then the 4th was Mrs. Blue. And the 5th was Mrs. Spencer.
My goodness, I can't remember all my...
She also taught the 6th. And from there I went across town to junior high, 7th grade. 7th and 8th grade was called junior high, and then I had a teacher for each class, and I can't remember all of them.
Very interesting.
But I credit my grade school teachers with, they taught phonics, and when I learned to read, that was the biggest gift anybody could have ever given me.
Really?
I used to, my mother got me a library card. I used to walk clear across town to the Carnegie Library. And I'd go in there, and of course they all knew me after a week or two. And I'd go in there every time I'd run out of books. I'd go in there with my library card, and I'd pick out adult books, mainly Edgar Rice Burroughs, Zane Grey, and that type of thing.
Oh my gosh.
And I just read constantly.
That's just amazing.
4th grade, I remember when I really started reading. And I was so thankful for these teachers for teaching me to read, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Except with one teacher, Mrs. Parrott. She was a special art teacher. And she come in and teach us Palmer-style penmanship. Where you
Oh,
had to,
yeah.
Yeah, I hated that stuff. And in addition to that, she taught music. And the music wasn't quite so bad because at that time there was a radio. Radios were just coming into being. And it wasn't everybody that had a radio, but she'd find some parent that had a radio, and she'd make arrangements to go to their house every Friday morning for an hour, and there's a program called the Walter Damrosch program, where they played classical music, and they sit down and they explained every instrument.
Oh.
I didn't mind that. I mean, it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That penmanship, that was terrible.
That was pretty awful. Oh, God.
Mrs. Parrott, she was a chubby thing,
Mrs.
too.
Parrott.
She didn't have much of a sense of humor.
Who was Mrs. Parrott? Your music teacher?
She was a music, art teacher, they called her.
Art teacher.
And art included music, penmanship, and actually drawing. We'd draw pictures and all kinds of things.
That's great, yeah. Did you have to walk to and from school? How far
Yep.
was your school?
About a mile from my grade school. And when I got into junior high, it was clear across town. It was probably a couple miles across
You had to
town.
walk there too?
Yeah.
Did you get to not have a bike or anything later
I
on?
did have a bike after I got into junior high. I used to ride my bike across town to school. Winter, icy road, didn't seem to matter. I never rode on the sidewalk, always out in the traffic.
Gee.
It's a wonder I didn't get killed, you know.
Yeah.
No such thing as studded tires then,
No.
and Wyoming is cold. I mean,
I
you get a
know.
lot of snow and
Yeah.
ice.
Yeah. You just have you don't even have 9 lives. You haven't used up any of them yet. You're just doing really good. When you got home from school each day, who was there to greet you? Your mother. What was the first thing you usually did when you got home from school? Do you remember?
Something to eat.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
I think all kids are that way.
Oh, here's a place where
When do we eat? What are we going to have for
When's
dinner?
When's dinner?
You've been through that for
Yes,
several of them.
yes, that's for sure.
And I had no help with homework. My mother, I think she went through the 6th grade. My father only went to the 3rd grade.
Mm.
And what I was studying was all Greek to them. So I had to do it all. I didn't have any homework help. In fact, homework was not a big item in those days.
Yeah. Not like it is nowadays.
Not like it is
wasn't as
today.
much assigned to.
We did it all in school and class.
Yeah. What'd you say Ninny went through what grade?
I think she went through the 6th grade, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the 7th.
Through 6th or 7th?
And my father only went to the 3rd grade. My father's growing up, they needed him to work on the farm. They couldn't afford to let him go to school.
Yeah.
So here again, I consider myself very fortunate I was able to go to school.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, let's see. What kind of significant historic events went on during your elementary school days? World War One. Did that occur while you were?
No,
a kid?
no, I was in grade
Later?
school way after World War One.
Okay.
It ended before I was born.
Oh, okay.
Well, I can remember President Hoover, President Roosevelt.
President Hoover was or president while you?
When I don't remember, I was very young, but he was the head
Roosevelt?
of Hoover was Calvin Coolidge, but I don't remember him too much.
Do you remember any friends that especially strike your mind? Which friends do you best remember?
Well, my buddy going through school was Owen Sullivan.
Owen?
O-W-E-N, Owen.
Owen Sullivan.
Good Irish name.
Yeah?
His father was a barber. I thought, man, that was great. We'd go walk home from school, you know, and go in the barber shop, and he'd get a nickel or a couple pennies. We'd go down to the store and get some penny candy.
Because he was rich,
I thought that was great. Man, that barbering is a great trade.
Was Owen Sullivan mostly grade school or high school or?
No, just grade school.
Just grade school.
When I went to high school, there was a Japanese family moved in next door to us, and I had these Japanese American kid friends. And of course, all during my junior high and up days, in the wintertime, I got very involved with ice skating. Had cramp-on skates, you clamp them right on your boots, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids would go down there. In those days, they made cars with a canvas, not canvas, cloth, fabric cloth top, I guess you call it. And they had these bows that come up around, and on the top was stretched across them. We go to the junkyard and get these bows, which are sort of an L-shaped thing, and they're about that long, I guess, and they had this crook on the end of them. And we go down to the junkyard and get a batch of those things for hockey sticks. We play hockey.
I'll be darned. Ice skating, playing hockey.
And we get an old snuff can, which is round,
Mm-hmm.
and we would fill it up with water and let it freeze, and that was our hockey puck.
Really hockey puck. Very, very inventive.
And we'd have her put a fire out on the edge of the river, and we get cold, we'd go over by the fire.
Let's go build a fire. And we're going to quit for today. This is, I hate it.